This is Raina Campbell, your Chief Dream Driver, and welcome to the No Parking Podcast, where through conversations and discussions with creators like yourself, we'll find interesting approaches to help you take your dreams out of park, put them in drive, and ride towards success. Hey, Dream Drivers. Welcome to episode 50 of the Dreams and Drive No Parking Podcast. And today, our guest is Kwame Christian. Kwame is a business lawyer and the founder of the American Negotiation Institute. He's passionate about teaching entrepreneurs and business professionals the art of negotiation so that they can get better deals and advance their careers. And he's also the host of the podcast Negotiation for Entrepreneurs, where he shares powerful persuasion techniques. And in this podcast, we're going to discuss a lot of things that I think will be really, really useful to you dream drivers listening in. Some of the things that we're going to discuss are why Kwame decided to become a lawyer in the first place and how he ended up eventually founding the American Negotiation Institute. We talk about offensive versus defensive negotiation in business, how to negotiate more confidently. We also talk about the idea of rejection therapy and how doing that can help you navigate through not so easy negotiation experiences. This was something that was fun. Kwame discusses 3 reasons why most people don't ask for what they want. So if you ever think about areas in your life where you were really, really scared to negotiate and to really, really go hard for what you believed was right or what you believe was the best deal that you should be getting, he really dives into how to navigate that and techniques and strategies you can use to overcome that. Last but not least, we talk about the most powerful question in negotiation and how negotiation can even play out in your personal life. This episode is one that I think is just filled with so many nuggets of information. Kwame has a lot of freebies that he's offering to you guys as well. So I really hope that you enjoy hearing Kwame's nuggets of advice. And this is a podcast that I know you're going to want to take notes on because there's so much that you can revisit later. Before we get into the episode, I just want to send you guys a reminder, as always, if you are listening in on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever, make sure you are subscribed to the Dreams and Drive channel so that you can get weekly updates on our newest episodes. And if you're feeling up to it, make sure to leave a review and let us know what you think of today's episode. I love reading reviews on iTunes especially, so if you feel it in your heart to leave a really nice review about this podcast, please do so. If you want today's show notes so that you can get the links to all the freebies from Kwame's discussion today, all you have to do is go to dreamsanddrive.com and click on episode 50. If you want to join our Dreams and Drive community, as you know, it's really easy. You can just go to dreamsanddrive.com/join and sign up there. And last but not least, make sure you are following us on social across the board at Dreams and Drive. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, even Pinterest now, YouTube. Find us, follow us, engage. 2017 is going to be off the chain, so I want to make sure that all you guys are part of the community before then. Really hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Kwame spits fire. Thank you so much for supporting me. I always make these intros longer every week. I'm sorry, you guys, but I love you all. Appreciate you all. Enjoy. Hi, Kwame. Welcome to Dreams and Drive. Thank you so much for being a guest on today's episode.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So I am so excited to talk to you. As you know, you are the negotiation guru. And there's so much more to your story. But before we get started, I love to start every podcast with tell me, what inspired you as a child? So if I were to say, who was Kwame the kid, what would your mother say? What would your grandmother say? Your best friends? Describe you as a child for our dream drivers.
Okay. See, this is a fun answer because I was inspired by my parents, my mom and my dad. My dad is a surgeon and my mom has a PhD in nutrition. So they always inspired me to focus on education. So I was always at least decent in school, couldn't get too bad. But as far as who I was growing up when I was younger, probably before college, I was a prankster. I was the kind of class clown kind of kid growing up. And it was interesting because I think I took on that role because I was so different from everybody else. So I grew up in a small town in Tiffin, Ohio. They called Tiffin, Ohio. So it's really small, like 20,000 people. And I used to always say there were 4 black people in the town, me, my mom, my dad, my brother. And to make us even more different, we were Caribbean. My parents are from the Caribbean, and so we had a really strong accent. And so I think the taking on the role of being the class clown was my way of trying to fit in and be liked throughout it. But I still have a good sense of humor now, but it's just not all I have. I have a little bit more substance to myself now.
Okay, so kind of talk to us about what, a lot of our dream drivers are people who are creative lifestyle entrepreneurs, but they may not have always been that. At some point they found their way to whatever it is their passion now. So walk us through your early years in college, post-college. How did you end up becoming a lawyer and eventually launching your own company?
Yeah, it's a really, really funny story because, fun fact, I never wanted to be a lawyer. It was never.
It's just a Caribbean thing, right? A doctor,
Exactly.
Lawyer, or anything else is a shame to the family, right?
Right. I saw my options were limited, so I was like, well, I know I'm going to get a professional degree. This one looks nice. And so the thing was, I majored in psych at OSU, psychology, and then I minored in foundations of law and Spanish. And at the time, the reason I decided to go and get my law degree and do a master's of public policy was because I wanted to be a politician. I was like, what is the degree combination that would give me the most credibility? I was like, oh, that's it. Let's do it. And so that was always my goal. And then as I started to learn more about politics and what goes into it and what you need to do, I was like, there is no way that is ever going to be a part of my life as a politician. So I was like, what am I going to do? But I've always had this drive to be an entrepreneur. And so I started this business. Actually, you'll like it as a Caribbean American. Mm-hmm. It was a website called My Tropics, where it was like Amazon.com, but for Caribbean products. So you could, if you had a Caribbean store, you could open it up, and you can open up like an online storefront. And then for the customer, you could buy the products you want. But the market really wasn't there because, unlike me, who grew up in the Midwest, the majority of Caribbean Americans already live in a place where you can get your Caribbean products. So it's not an issue. Access isn't an issue. So the site didn't work out. So I graduated and I passed the bar, thankfully. And I was sitting there getting sworn in, asking myself, what do I want to be when I grow up? Because I know it's not a lawyer.
And how old were you at this point?
How old was I? I think I was 24. I graduated at 24.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, it was an interesting time. So I did social justice work for a couple of years, but you know how we are. We always have to have a side hustle. And so I asked myself, like, well, if you could start a business right now, what would it be? And I was like, well, you have this law degree. Let's make it happen. So at 25, I opened up my law firm and started serving the needs of entrepreneurs and startup companies, and while working full time at the university.
You know, it's funny. I'll be so honest. When I first went to your website and it was called like Christian Law, I forgot that your last name was Christian. And I was like, oh, okay. So his law practice is for Christians. It's like a Christian law practice.
I get that all the time. And so I'd say, listen, I don't practice. They would ask, hey, do you practice church law? I was like, no, I'm a business lawyer. But the thing is, people don't realize that we are, as lawyers, we're legally required to have our last name as the name of the law firm.
Really?
So, yeah, I have no choice. So it's the Christian law office or the Christian law firm. Those are my options.
Wait,
that's it.
I just learned something today.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about it now, like, of all the law offices I've seen, it's always blank and blank law firm or blank and it's never a creative name. It's never like, come get a... I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that.
Us or something.
So why is that?
Because the law is boring. Well, I'm just kidding. It's because the legal profession is very protective of its image. And so what their concern is they don't want people to, for instance, let's say if you have a personal injury type of law firm, they don't want you to name it the Bulldog Law Firm. We'll fight for your rights. It doesn't make lawyers look good. So instead of, just advising us not to name our firm something stupid, they say you will all just use your last name and that's it.
So I feel bad for people who have. I mean, Christian is a fairly popular last name. So what happens if you have somebody else who has a Christian as a last name? Do you guys fight for that, or is it just?
No, now there are 2 Christian law offices in town. That's it.
Oh wow!
Yeah, there is no flexibility.
So what kind of work do you do for your clients? And maybe we can talk about how this work sparked you to want to found the American Negotiation Institute.
Yeah, it's so with the law firm, like I said, I do business law. So incorporation, contracts, do some negotiation for my clients, that kind of stuff. But my passion always was negotiation. And so right now my focus is building that. And long term, my goal is to make the Negotiation Institute the main thing, and then just keep the law firm on the back burner. Because actually, I think this conversation, what we were just talking about, is a great example. Because, yeah, I could just funnel all of my negotiation clients and consulting through the law firm. But with the legal practice, I have a lot of limitations as far as marketing goes. So it's not just the name, but also I'm restricted in the way I can market, and I'm restricted by jurisdiction because I'm only barred in federal court and Ohio. So it's founding a completely separate consulting firm gives me a lot more flexibility when it comes to the negotiation side and building that part of the business.
See, I'm getting some good tips just in case I do make my parents happy and go get a JD. You know, I have lots of things to consider here.
That's right. Yeah, it's interesting. You always need to beware of the ethics. Be wary of the ethics laws that you're dealing with when it comes to law, because they don't play. And so I have the Supreme Court of Ohio on speed dial, because sometimes I have questions about, hey, I want to put forward this Facebook ad. Can I do that? You know, I don't want them to show up at my door and be like, hey, you can't do that. Give me your license. And I'm like, no, I can't make any money. So it's always have to stay on top of that ethics as a lawyer.
But I think that's also a good point for just entrepreneurs in general, because I think a lot of first-time entrepreneurs, and especially creative ones, so a lot of people who are listening into the show who are in that creative and lifestyle fields, they often neglect the legal side of their business, you know, and that's something that I know there's probably so many legal things I probably haven't done when it comes to Dreams and Drive and stuff, but I think it's just so important to really understand how your business is operating. So I know you definitely have probably worked with clients in that lens, right?
Oh, for sure. And that's the thing. You know, the thing is, with entrepreneurs, we're focused on making money. That's what we want to do. That's what's fun. But the thing is, I always tell them, you know, you don't need to get this legal stuff in place. However, if things blow up, you're going to regret it. And it's going to cost you a lot more stress and money down the road if you don't take care of it right now. And so, hey, actually, this is perfect. I have a freebie for your folks if you're interested, because I know a lot of the people in this audience are entrepreneurs. If you go to AmericanNegotiationInstitute.com/law, you can get a free download of everything you need legally to have in place legally to protect your business if you're an entrepreneur. It's a 6-page guide, so everything you need to know there.
And I'll link to that in the show notes, so you guys can just go to dreamsanddrive.com and click on this episode, and you'll have the direct link there too. Thanks, Kwame. I'm going to go download that after we get off. Be like, I don't want anyone to come sue me for anything.
That's right.
But let's talk about, you know, you said that you found out through practicing law that you really, really had a passion for negotiation. What does that mean, and how did that translate into what you're doing today with the American Negotiation Institute?
Yeah, so this is the funny thing. It's sometimes your passion is always right in front of you, and it's just too obvious for you to see it. So like in undergrad, I was interested in psychology because I loved to figure out how people thought. And then in law school, it turned out OSU is actually it has now the top ranked dispute resolution program in the country. And so I took a negotiation class and fell in love. And so at OSU, we had this, they have negotiation competitions, just like they have like moot court competitions or debate competitions. And so my partner and I, we ended up winning the competition at Ohio State. And then we got to represent the school at regionals in Ottawa, Ontario. And we won that competition too. And then we made it to the semifinals of nationals in New Orleans. And so I was hooked. And then it's like I forgot that I loved it, right after graduation. And I'm like, what do I want to be when I grow up? But then, earlier this year when I left my full-time job to do the law firm 100%, I just had to have an honest conversation with myself. I was like, well, that you're not in love with law. So what is it that you would do for free? And so I was like, well, it's the thing that I've already been doing for free. I started putting on negotiation seminars about a year ago to get more legal clients. And I think it was the most fun I had. And I got a lot of great reviews. I was like, well, you love podcasting, you love negotiation. How about you make that your thing? And so my goal this year was to get to a point where I was only doing things that I really, really enjoy doing. And that's my goal with the negotiation side, with the American Negotiation Institute. I love teaching it, and I love having the opportunity to act as a consultant and work with people through their negotiation, help them solve their negotiation problems. And the cool thing is, again, since it's not part of the law firm, I can do it wherever people happen to be in the world.
I love that. Love that. So let's do a little mini seminar right now. I don't want to put you in the hot spot, but I do have some questions because I think this is something that is so crucial to any entrepreneur's success, is knowing how to negotiate. So maybe you can define, what does negotiation look like for an entrepreneur?
For sure. So my definition of negotiation is anytime you're in a conversation and one or more people in the conversation want something. And when you look at it that way, we're constantly negotiating. We're negotiating at home with our siblings, our relatives, our significant others, especially, and we're negotiating at work. And so it's more than just talking about the numbers too at work. So as an entrepreneur, even after you seal the deal with a client, then you need to negotiate with them and persuade them to follow your recommendations, to follow your course of action. It never stops. And so we as entrepreneurs are constantly provided with opportunities to negotiate. And the beautiful thing about negotiation is that it can be used offensively to try and get more value for your company. It could be used defensively to protect you and to save you money on expenses. And the third thing, and I think this is the most important thing, it strengthens relationships. Whenever you're negotiating, you should always be trying to strengthen your relationship with the counterpart. So even if you get more, you can actually get the person to like you more as you get more out of the deal.
All right, so I like that. You mentioned offensive, defensive, and strengthening relationships. Can you give an example of what an offensive negotiation looks like for an entrepreneur?
For sure. So let's say we're a consultant, and so we want to sell our package that we know would do the best for our clients, but it would also confer the most value for us. So it's like the most expensive package. And so, for instance, I would suggest starting with a high offer. And so this is called anchoring. And so when you anchor, you ask for more than what you intend to get or what you think is realistic. So you set a realistically high offer that is acceptable, but understanding that most likely people are going to they might not be able to have that in their budget. And the thing about anchoring, psychologically speaking, is that when it sets the reference point for the conversation. So just like it sounds like, imagine there's this big heavy anchor at the high point, the high number value of the conversation. It's going to be harder for it to move downward from that point. So as a consultant, there's a really good opportunity for you to use negotiation to get a higher price for the same amount of work that you're doing just by using this skill.
So I was reading on I think I was listening to one of your previous episodes where you were talking about bluffing and how bluffing is, maybe you can describe that. Is that an offensive negotiation or is that a defensive negotiation tactic?
Right. I would say it is aggressive offensive move.
Okay.
But I never recommend bluffing. And so
Okay.
here's what a bluff is. So a bluff is threatening to do something that you do not intend to do. Essentially, it's a version of lying. And the reason I don't ever suggest bluffing is because it's incredibly high risk. If it works, yeah, you have a high reward. But if it doesn't work and somebody calls you on your bluff, now you have been exposed as a liar. And the thing is, like, the most persuasive thing you have is your credibility and your reputation. And once you are exposed as a bluffer, then you lose all of that. So here's an example. This is what I do instead of bluffing. So I don't bluff, I offer warnings. And so a warning, unlike a bluff, isn't aggressive. It's just a statement of fact. So like if I walk up if I'm at the Grand Canyon and I see a sign that says, "Do not proceed any further or you will fall off this cliff." That sign's not being aggressive. That sign is just telling me the ramifications of my continued course of action. So let's go back to the consultant example. So if I were a consultant and I were offering a warning and the person says, "Hey, I see your services are offered for $1,000. My budget is only 800. So can you do 800?" And then you're like, "Listen, if 800 is all you can do, I'm sorry that it's not going to work out and we'll have to go our separate ways." So that would be my warning. And so if they call me on that and they say, "Okay, well, I'm leaving," it's really easy for me to just say, "Okay, bye." And that's it. Whereas if I were bluffing, they leave and then I'm like, okay, 800. That works. And now I look stupid because I wasn't telling the truth. And so then going forward, my contract prices are going to be perpetually lower because I've been called out, and I know, and now everybody knows that 800 is really my new bottom line.
I never thought about it like that. And I know, like, even myself, sometimes, like, my problem is, and I was talking about this with another woman that I was interviewing with last week. We were talking about, like, relationships with money and just relationships with talking and being, what's the word? Not aggressive, but just being confident in what you are delivering. And I think sometimes I know a lot of people who might be listening to this show, they may not be comfortable with negotiating. Because I think even if you give someone the tactics and the strategy and what to do, they still have to execute it. So what kind of tips would you give to the person who really just doesn't feel like they could go through with an effective negotiation?
Yeah, it is tough. I'm not going to act like it's not. And it's tough for me too, because for me, I'm a guy, I like to be liked. And I think that's something that comes from my childhood too. I like to be liked, and that's a weakness because there's a big difference between being liked and respected. So for me, there's no magic about it. I had to get over it. But here's a technique that you can use to get over it faster. So I engage in something called rejection therapy. And so in rejection therapy, I ask for things that I know I have no right getting at all, just should not get, and fully anticipating getting rejected. And so the cool thing about rejection theory is that there are two outcomes, and they both are good for you. Outcome number one, they say no, and you get the rejection. And then you feel that rejection, and you realize my heart is still beating. That wasn't that bad. And so it makes it easier when the time for real negotiations come up. It's like, okay, I'm going to ask for what I want. I might get rejected, but I know I'm going to still, nothing bad comes of it. So I need to get more comfortable asking for what I want. And then the second thing is sometimes you ask for what you want and you get it. So last week was my birthday, and I got a free pastry at Panera. And so I was with one of my mentees at the time. And so I said, "Hey, thank you for the free pastry, but I'm here with one of my mentees, so can he get a free pastry too?" I have no right to get a second free pastry, but I got it. So it showed up on my receipt as a miscellaneous discount. And so you'd be surprised, just utterly shocked at what you can get when you start asking. And that's the first part of any negotiation, asking for what you want. But unfortunately, that's where most negotiations end, because people don't ask for what they want.
Why do you think that is?
So I think it's three things. One is fear of rejection. You don't want to get rejected. It never feels good to get a no. The second one is you don't want to look needy. So asking for what you want puts you in a position where it's a little bit vulnerable. And so you never want people to look at you and say, oh, Kwame's just asking for another handout. Is he poor or something like that? So that's some level of insecurity people might have. And then the other one is people don't want to be looked upon as greedy either. So it's like, why does he want so much? But again, I think the majority of the barriers we face are self-imposed. And then once you recognize the things that you can get when you start to ask, you realize that the benefits that could be conferred upon you simply by asking outweigh significantly the detriments of the social rejection that you're creating in your own mind that doesn't really exist.
Oh my gosh, I'm over here like snapping, but I don't want to do it. I don't want to like actually snap. I actually wrote down, how important is personal development with this whole negotiation journey, because I think to be an effective negotiator, you also have to be self-aware and you have to be aware of others. And I know you were talking about how you liked psychology when you were in college and all that stuff. So do you think that if you want to get better at negotiation, you also have to know how to master yourself and your emotions?
Absolutely. And it's really interesting. A lot of times people aren't very self-aware. They don't know how they come off. And that's why it's important to get an idea of your own negotiation style, and which really mirrors your communication style. One of my guests came on and talked about developing your own negotiation style. So I have a freebie for that too. If you're interested, I have freebies galore. I just love giving it away.
Great
so
marketing, yeah.
So if you go to the same website, AmericanNegotiationInstitute.com/style, it could help you to develop your own negotiation style. But it's like simply doing introspection isn't enough to figure out to become more self-aware. You actually need to do an unofficial survey of the people who know you the best. So ask your work colleagues, ask your family, ask your friends, like what do you see as my communication strengths and weaknesses? How would you describe my demeanor? How do I come off to you? And so the guy I was interviewing, my friend Luke, he said that he always viewed himself as a shy person, but for me, that was just absurd because he's always really outgoing and bubbly. And so once he had that realization, he had to alter the way that he kind of approached these conversations because he thought he was being shy, but for everybody else, he was coming off as really bubbly and outgoing and personable. So what that meant for him as far as making substantive changes is that he realized that not everybody has that same level of energy that he has. And so he would read them and see what kind of level of energy they have. And then if they are a kind of lower, kind of low key kind of person, he would dial himself back. He wouldn't act like anybody else, but he would just kind of, temper it down a little bit to match their level, to make them feel more comfortable in the conversation.
So that was his style then? He developed that style and it worked for him?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, because now he does, he represented athletes, did financial, you think of Ballers, HBO show Ballers. He did that first and then went to law school. And then he does mergers and acquisitions for a Fortune 500 company.
Okay, so let's talk about defensive negotiation and what does that look like, and when would an entrepreneur need to use that?
So for me, defensive is saving resources. So for instance, there's this. Have you ever heard of? There's a website where you can use. The hesitation is confidentiality because I don't want to give away the name of this company, and then everybody would be like, hey. Now I know their price is negotiable. Okay, well then we can talk in theory. There's a company X. There's a company that helps podcasters, and it helps to promote podcasters. And we always think that prices are set in stone, and they're really not. And so I got this offer to do the podcast promotion, and I asked, hey, what flexibility do you have in this price? And he just lowered the price $100, just like that. Just because I asked, that was it. And for me, like the most powerful question in negotiation is what flexibility do you have? Because of two reasons. The first reason is it's open-ended, and the best questions in negotiation are open-ended because it requires elaboration. You can't just hide behind a no. And then the second thing is it operates under the assumption that there is flexibility, because we all know there is. When we're setting prices, we figure out our overhead, we figure out what we need to price it at to make it meet expenses. And then to a certain extent, we just make it up. So there is fluff in every price. So I always start with that, and it saves hundreds of dollars, thousands if you do it regularly throughout the year. And what I would suggest is target the expenses that you have that compound. So what are the monthly expenses? So think about personally, you could do your cable and wireless bill. In business, you could talk about your business lease. And so, for instance, I was negotiating on behalf of one of my clients here one of my legal clients, and I was able to negotiate the whole first year rent free.
What?
Yeah, it was a 5-year lease. And so they had the space vacant for a while. And so they were willing to do it because the way the negotiation worked, we kind of pushed the expenses to the back end, but it was important for my client because they were moving to a new location and they were extremely cost sensitive at the front end of the contract. The overall contract was fair, but it's like, listen, we'll get you your money, but if you just are flexible with us on the first year, give us that first year free, we'll make it up on the back end. So everybody won.
That's a really good example. I've been trying to do that with an apartment, but I don't think it works the same with places you live.
Well, you'd be surprised. You never know until you ask, right?
That is true. But I think I'm just doing it more for selfish reasons, whereas I just want to live in a luxury apartment but not have to pay luxury prices. So, yeah. So let's go to the third thing you mentioned, where you can use negotiation to strengthen relationships. And when talking about this, can you also talk about this in the lens of partnerships? Because a lot of our dream drivers are, looking to partner with other brands, companies, other entrepreneurs. So how can they use negotiation to really leverage that?
Yeah, and I'm really glad you said that because partnerships, that's one of my focuses coming forward in the next 6 months, because a lot of clients come to me and they're like, hey, Kwame, I need to sue the pants off my partner. We need to dissolve this company. This is terrible. And I'm like, I look at their agreements that they put in place or the agreements that they didn't put in place. And I look at the relationship as a whole and I'm like, you all should not have even began this partnership. And so the thing is, what I've realized is that negotiation, the times when we use the negotiation the most are when we're talking to people closest to us. So we're going to be negotiating with our business partners more than anybody else. So I'm focusing on how to structure a strong relationship in a partnership. So think of it like premarital class for business partners. And so I've published the first episode on that with my American Negotiation Institute podcast, but I'm going to start a whole nother one on just focused on partnerships alone, because I think it's that important. And so when you're starting a partnership, the first thing you need to look at is whether or not this person is the one for me, because let's relate it to an actual relationship. So imagine you go to Vegas, you meet this person at a casino, and then Saturday night y'all are getting married. That's essentially what happens with a lot of these business partners. We get infatuated with somebody. We have a really great conversation about business. And then you're like, you know what? We should partner up. Let's make this happen. Boom. And now you're in this committed relationship for a long-term period of time. And the thing is, when I talk to my lawyers who actually engage in business litigation, they tell me like, hey, I never wanted to do family law because divorces are messy and there's so much emotion. But what they found is that sometimes the breakups between partners are more emotional because there's more money at stake. And so people go into these partnerships just willy-nilly, but you need to make sure you have things set in place. So make sure you get your legal documents in place. Make sure you and your partner have the same vision. Make sure you have the same values. Those things are really important. And so, again, freebie. If you go to the website /partnership, there's I think it's a 3-page guide on how to have a successful partnership, because I think it's one of the most overlooked parts of businesses, because really great businesses can fail because of bad relationships. And it is one of my biggest pet peeves to see that happen.
Okay, so I'm going to stop us for 1 second. I just want to do a little, I'm going to make up a new segment, Dream Driver Tip of the Day. So if you guys are listening and you see what Kwame's doing, how he's directing us to site to a page on his website, that is so good. I love that you're doing it, because it's also something that our dream drivers can do for themselves, right? Having this freebie, having this, this guide that you created that you're now offering to the audience is great. And I want to ask you, I haven't gone to the website, but is it something where they have to put their email in to get it?
Of course.
Okay,
of course.
Yes. So Kwame, tell us why you use that tactic, and just do a little, teach us something about marketing and how this has helped you grow your list, your email list.
For sure. So this is something that I learned from the big dogs, like the Pat Flynn's and Amy Porterfields of the world. Because what I've realized is that the people in our space, actually the people in business in general, who are the most successful are the people who are the most generous. And so my goal with this is to confer as much value as possible. So like I said, like the legal guide, that's 6 pages. The partnership guide, that's like 4 pages. The list, that's only 1. But I also have an introvert's guide to negotiation. It's questions that I see a lot from the people that I talk to, and then it's like, listen, I can make a quick and easy solution for you, and create a symbiotic relationship. You give me your email, and then I give you this free guide. And it's worked wonders for growing my list. And the cool thing is like, hey, if you don't want to get it by emails, you can just subscribe and still keep the freebie. But I'm just going to tell you, like, hey, I have a new podcast posted. Check it out. And that's it.
Yes, okay. Thank you for being the first guest on the Dream Driver marketing tip of the podcast. I don't know what I'm where I'm going with that, but I just really wanted to make that a teaching point, because I think it's something that we all could do within whatever business you have. There definitely is space to grow your audience by offering some type of free content that they just have to exchange your email for. And as you guys know, I am a big proponent of having an email list before social media. Or after social media, your email list will probably live on more than your social media followers will. So that's something that is really, really important. Okay, so let's get back to scheduled programming, Kwame. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you is how can, because I don't want to make this just only about business, but how has becoming a better negotiator helped you in your personal life? Because I really think personal life and business is related. And if you have a strong personal life and you have those good support systems, they'll help you as you're growing your business. So maybe you can just talk about how this has impacted that part of your life too.
For sure. I think, and I'm really glad you said that, because people really underestimate the impact that the personal life has on business. So for example, with me, he is 364 days old right now, a baby. And so he actually, you'd like this. His name is Kai. He's named after Kaichir Falls in Guyana.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we have the baby, we have a house, we have a mortgage, and I decided this year, I'm like, this is a good time for me to quit my job. That's not an easy conversation to have. And I honestly don't think I would have been able to pull off that conversation if I didn't have these negotiation skills. So without a doubt, the most important negotiation I've had this year was with my spouse. I'm talking about whether or not I can quit my job. And then after that, how much of our personal funds can we put into the business to, as far as investment goes? Those are really difficult conversations, but they're conversations that need to be had. And when you develop negotiation skills, it makes it a lot easier for everybody. Because like I said, the third goal in negotiation is to strengthen relationships. So when you do it the right way, you can still get what you want and have a good relationship too.
All right. So thinking about your experience working with multiple clients and, having this varied journey thus far, what do you think is the number one mistake you see so many entrepreneurs making when it comes to how they're negotiating and how they're conducting business?
Okay, I think the number one mistake is approaching negotiation and persuasion like a character in Scandal. Okay, and
Sorry.
so
Okay.
didn't see that one coming, did you?
No, I didn't. I love Scandal though. Olivia's my girl.
See, I thought Scandal would be like the perfect show for me, like with my interest in politics and business and things like that. But there was one thing I couldn't get over, and it's such a negotiation nerd thing. But when people in the show get really inspired and then they deliver this long monologue and the other person who is on the other side just sits there and listens, and then they're automatically persuaded because the points they made were just so good. Mm-hmm. That is not at all how it works. Not at all. Because here's the thing. When it comes to negotiation and persuasion, it's not really about who's right at all. Because we've all had those conversations where we realize like, oh my goodness, I see that I'm wrong, but I will continue to fight just so I can beat you as a person personally, because whenever we get into arguments, our pride gets wrapped up in it. And so one thing when it comes to persuasion is that you cannot convince anybody of anything. They have to convince themselves. And instead of focusing on making statements and making good arguments, even if you're right, the best way to do it and the most effective way to do it is to ask open-ended questions. And so, for example, this is a tip that you can use to control any conversation. And I'll use a car metaphor because we're in a no parking zone. Okay. So if you had the opportunity to choose, would you rather have your hands on the steering wheel or your foot on the gas or brake pedal if you had to choose between one or the other?
Are you asking me?
Oh, I'm asking you.
On the steering wheel.
And why is that?
Because I'll be able to control where. I don't know. Because being on the brakes seems scary versus being able to steer seems like something I can control more.
Exactly. Control. And that's the goal. So how do you put then the question, it begs the question, how do you control the conversation in a negotiation? How do you put your hand on the proverbial steering wheel? And you do that by asking open-ended questions. So here's a great example. You are interviewing me. So you are the one asking me the questions. So since I'm the guest, I'm talking the majority of the time, but you are telling me exactly where you want me to go. And you want to do the exact same thing in negotiation. And so when you order your questions correctly, you can lead them down a logical path for them to convince themselves. And the benefit of that is when you ask them after the fact, like, hey, why did you change your mind? They would say, I just thought about it differently, and now I've come to that conclusion. When in reality, it's you that led them there. And so when somebody feels like they're part of the decision-making process, it increases compliance. Whereas, let's say I bully through somebody with really, really great points and I am right, and they concede simply because I am right, they will comply, but begrudgingly. Because a lot of times we just focus on getting a yes or a no or whatever outcome we want, but we don't think about the long term. We don't think about the damage we've done to the relationship and whether or not somebody is going to comply willingly. Because I can get somebody to do a job and then they'll do the job really poorly still to spite me.
That sucks. Really? No, it's happened, You know when it happens too, you're like, damn, maybe I should have, been a little bit nicer. Yep. So I tell you, if people can just take one thing from this interview, it would be just ask open-ended questions and lead them down a path. And you'd be shocked at how well that works when it comes to bringing people where you want them to go. All right. Well, I have one last open-ended question for you.
Nice.
What keeps you going? So I think this is something that a lot of our dream drivers always want to know. Like, this journey is challenging. There's lots of ups and downs. So when you are feeling at your lowest, when you want to put your car into a park and just get out start walking, like what keeps you going?
For me, it's the fear of regret. And I played sports all through my life, and I was never somebody who was like, oh, it's the joy of winning that keeps me going. It was always the fear of losing, hate that feeling. And so for me, earlier this year, when I made that decision to quit the job, I could coast. I really could have coasted with a decent job and doing the law firm on the side, and that would have been okay. In the eyes of most people. I have a house, a kid, a great wife and everything, but it wasn't enough for me. And I looked down 10, 20 years, I was like, I am on my way to being a highly educated average person. And I didn't want that. And so whenever I get tired, I think about the Kwame of 1 year later, 2 years later, 5 years later. How would he view this behavior? And how would it affect where he is now? And so whenever I get tired or frustrated, I just keep that long-term vision. And I say, what is the best version of me? Okay, and then what would that guy do? And then I try to do that. And that's what keeps me going.
I think that's a great way to segue into our lightning round. This point of the interview, I'm going to give you a prompt, and I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word, okay?
Perfect.
All right. So the first word is park.
Indecisive.
Reverse.
Fearful.
Neutral.
Coasting.
Drive.
Progressing toward your goal.
Okay. You seem like you knew what you were gonna say there, Kwame.
Oh, of course. Listen, that is part one of negotiation. I always prep I prep probably an hour for this conversation.
Okay. Oh wow, that makes me feel happy. I don't know why. It's one of those podcaster moments where someone's prepping to be on your show.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So last but not least, if you want to be a dream driver, you have to have the keys to success. So Kwame, tell our dream driver what are 3 things you think they need in their toolkit before they hit the road.
Okay, so the first thing is a team. So whenever I think about somebody who says they're self-made, there are 2 ways you can be successful. It's either you can lie and say you're self-made or admit that you had a lot of help. And so even if you're going this solo, you need to have a team. So I'm part of 3 mastermind groups, and that has helped me a lot. Because when you're an entrepreneur, you kind of live in this echo chamber of your own mind where any weird idea you come up with sounds really good. So you need to vet it with your team and make sure that it makes sense. And so that's the first thing I'd say. The next thing is get a business coach, or if you can't afford a business coach, get a mentor, multiple mentors that you trust. Somebody that has done what you want to do and done it successfully, and figure out how they did it and get their guidance. And then the last thing is you need to continue to learn. And so for me, using me as an example, the thing I love to learn is negotiation. That's obvious. I just compiled all of the negotiation notes I've taken in business just since law school, just all of them together. And I'm a prolific note taker. And it was 402 pages of notes.
By hand or computer?
Oh, of course not.
Okay,
this is 2016. That's out of control.
No, I still write by hand.
Seriously?
My interview notes are by hand. Like, I love the physical act of writing. So I think I will forever be a handwritten note taker. When I was in high school, though, we had tablets. So I could handwrite on my computer. So that was a little caveat there. But okay.
See, for me, I listen to audiobooks. After going to law school and being force-fed books, I can't read books like with my eyes, so I use audiobooks. So then I dictate the notes as I'm listening to it, and so I just speak out all these notes. So that's why it's just so important to continue to hone your skills, and like either your substantive skill, like for me it's negotiation, and also my business skills, because I realized earlier this year, like I was just devouring these negotiation books, that I had to put a hard stop on that. I haven't read a negotiation book since May, because I was like, listen, Kwame, you need to stop. And you need to focus on what your weakness is now, because your weakness is the business side, growing the business. So you need to educate yourself on that, and then you can get back to your negotiation work. So really being intentional about continuing to educate yourself in business and your substantive field is going to be key to your growth.
Those are such great tips. Thank you so much, Kwame, for sharing that. Do you have any parting words for our dream drivers? And maybe you can tell us where we can find you online beyond the website and our freebies that you talked about throughout the episode.
For sure. So place to find me, LinkedIn. I connect with people on LinkedIn. And so everybody that connects with me on LinkedIn gets an actual personal message from me, and then we chat. Because my thing is, and I'm sure you've experienced this as a podcaster, you can see the statistics, but it's like you're speaking to an invisible audience. It's the weirdest thing. So I'm always like, talk to me, tell me who you are, tell me what you want me to talk about, and I'll do it. And so now people are reaching out to me on LinkedIn, and that's been really, really rewarding and fun. And so connect with me on LinkedIn. And then as far as parting words of advice, I would just say you just need to keep moving forward. One of my absolute favorite business saying is fail faster. And as long as you're failing forward, you're going the right way. Because the thing is, I know I'm going to make mistakes. And the thing, we have this procrastination by perfection, where people think, okay, no, I'm not going to start my business right now because I need to do X, Y, Z. No, you don't need to do X, Y, Z. You need to get out there. You need to make mistakes, and then you need to adjust. And then try again, make mistakes, adjust. It's kind of like being on a balance beam. No, even Simone Biles, she's never going to be perfectly balanced. There are always going to be these micro adjustments we need to make in order to stay on that beam. And that's the same way it is with business. So just keep moving forward, keep progressing, and making adjustments as you go.
All right, so that's a wrap for episode 50 with Kwame Christian. I hope that you guys enjoyed hearing his dream driving story as well as his keys to success. Let me know what you think of today's episode. As I said earlier in the intro, go to iTunes, leave a review, share this with a friend, go to Twitter, Instagram, post about it. I want to get your feedback on today's show. If you thought that Kwame's negotiation techniques and strategies are going to be useful to your own dream driving story, let us know and pass this forward. Pay it forward to someone else who you think will benefit from listening. As always, if you want today's show notes, and especially if you want the freebies that Kwame mentions in today's episode, just go to dreamsanddrive.com and click on episode 50. Find us on social at Dreams and Drive. Subscribe. I appreciate you all. I say this every week, but I could not have gotten to 50 episodes without each and every listener that comes back each week. Keep dreaming, keep driving. We'll chat again in episode 51.